You know, for too long we have taken gratitude for granted. And yes, we all say thank you. We all say those things that really help society along, and thank goodness we do. But how often when we use these words, do we not truly feel them deep in our hearts? How many times do we just say the words and they just, they almost mean nothing. They just come out automatically. We do it every day. It's a part of our lives. But I believe that we are to truly become grateful for our lives. And the reason for that is that there are just many, many blessings that come along with being grateful. We truly have things that happen in our lives that as a result of gratitude take us to a new level of spirituality. Recently, scientists have begun to chart a course of research, and they're aiming at finding out what all of the benefits are, because they found that there are many, but they believe that there may be even more associated with gratitude. And they're finding that people who practice gratitude consistently report a lot of benefits, many, many benefits. And gratitude is a power for good. And they found this out, and they want to know more. The first thing that they noticed was stronger immune systems and lower blood pressure. You know, we've become a society of taking pills for those things. And yet, we find through this research that they've been doing for over 10 years now that we can actually change it through expressing our gratitude in so many ways. The second thing that we receive from gratitude is higher levels of positive emotions. When we are truly thankful, don't we feel just up? Don't we feel good? Don't we feel energized? It's just a wonderful feeling when we can feel gratitude. We also feel more joy and optimism and happiness. I think that in itself would be enough for us to really begin to practice gratitude more often. And we act with more compassion and generosity ourselves. It just makes us feel good to feel so grateful. We also feel less lonely and isolated. You know, it just makes us good to say to the grocery store clerk that was very friendly, "Thank you," in a heartfelt way. There are so many times that we can actually really express gratitude for something that someone has done for us, that they took as just a matter of that's what they do, when in actuality it meant so very much to us, and sometimes we forget to say thank you. Thank you. And I was taught a long time ago that you can't just say thank you. I was taught that when you express gratitude, you let the person know what it is about them that you're grateful for. And as a result of that, you feel even better and they feel even better because they know you really mean it because you've given it some thought. You know, when we express gratitude, we grow spiritually and we expand our consciousness. Have you ever noticed that expansive feeling that you have when you've given someone a true compliment? Or thank them so much for something wonderful that they did for you? I have never been so grateful as I was Saturday night. I have never felt such expansion and such gratitude, and so good, and so happy. I think I stretched my mouth from smiling. And all of these things are the reason that the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley, and at Davis are conducting a 3-year study to find out what all of the benefits are to gratitude. They think it's so important. They're dedicating millions of dollars and 3 years to just the study of gratitude. So I'd like to ask you this morning, what are you grateful for? And I'd like for you just to shout it out. Family, shelter, love,
You.
beauty,
Chocolate.
grandkids, sisters, brothers. Fall program, thank you. Barbara, oh me, thank you. We have
Tithers.
so many things, don't we? Wow, so many things, so many things. Gratitude also not only helps us to expand our good times and makes us feel much, much more appreciative, but it also helps us through hard times as well. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, how does it help us through hard times? When we're in a hard time, it's really hard to feel any gratitude. It's really difficult. A decade's worth of research on gratitude has shown that when life is going well, gratitude allows us to celebrate and magnify that goodness. But what about those bad times? What about when life goes badly? Well, here's how Jesus handled it. In John 11:41, he says, it tells us how Jesus gave thanks when he went to the tomb of Lazarus. Remember, he got the message when he was in another town that Lazarus was ill and that it didn't look good. And he just sort of dilly-dallied around. I'm not sure why he did that, but maybe it was to show that God is great. So anyway, he finally gets to the town and to the house of Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha. And they say it's too late. Lazarus is dead. He's been in the grave for 4 days now. And Jesus cries. He cries. But then, he's very sad. But then he asks where the tomb is. And they take him to the tomb and they say, but you know what? He's been dead for 4 days. It stinks in there. That's what it said. But Jesus did something very remarkable. Before he had them open that tomb, he looked up to the heavens. In other words, he went to a higher consciousness. And he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. This is before anything has happened. He is giving thanks before. And then he asked that the tomb be opened and called Lazarus forth. What I believe that story tells us is that even in the midst of something really, really difficult and hard, we can call forth the good in our life. We can find something in almost any situation that is going to take us to a higher space. Did I just lose? No? Okay. We are in this type of situation in our lives all of the time. I mean, we have things happen, don't we? We have tragedies happen. There are natural phenomena that happens that we don't expect, that we really can't even control. That all we have is how we control ourselves and the way we respond to the situation. We just came through a particularly difficult time economically in this country. And many people's retirements were reduced or wiped out. Sometimes people ask if we should even be grateful under such circumstances. Because when something like that happens and we've been depending on the physical, we find that sometimes that physical's just gone. And if we have not developed our spiritual self, if we have not brought forth that spirit within us, we have nothing to work with. And so when people say, well, should I even find something to be grateful for? And I say, yes. Not only will a grateful attitude help, it is essential. It is essential. In fact, it's precisely under these crisis circumstances that we gain by a perspective of gratitude. When we do this, we find that even though we're in despair, even though we feel broken, gratitude has the power to energize our being and give us hope. It always gives us hope. In the face of illness, gratitude has the power to heal us. In other words, gratitude can help us cope with hard times. It really can. Don't get me wrong, I am not suggesting that gratitude will come easily or naturally in a crisis. It doesn't, particularly if the crisis is a dire one. If it's a deep crisis where we have lost someone we loved and it comes upon us, it's really difficult to say, oh, I'm grateful about this. Because no one feels grateful at that time. But time does heal. Time does heal. And there comes a time when you can look at that circumstance from a different perspective, like you did this morning in the meditation. You looked at it from a different perspective, from a time that you're now removed, and you can see the things that you now do differently because of it. The way you have grown stronger, the way you have learned to cope with things in a higher and better way. You can really begin to see that there were some blessings in that. Sometimes we have a hard time doing that immediately. But if we can start, we will get through our challenges much easier. We can move through them quicker and more gently. But it is vital to make a distinction between feeling grateful and being grateful. We don't have control over our emotions sometimes. They just seem to come unbidden. But yet we know that feelings follow thoughts. That when we have a thought about something, that there's a feeling that follows it, that takes us on to another place. So we change our thoughts first and say there must be something here. There must be something here that I can find to be grateful for. It's not easy. Feelings follow the way we look at the world. Our thoughts, the way we see things. And we need to be able to get to where we can see a distance between the 2 points. But being grateful is a choice. It is a choice. A prevailing attitude that endures and is relatively immune to the gains and the losses that flow in and out of our lives. Because something new is happening all the time, isn't it? We're constantly changing. Change is just the way life is. And if we hate change, oh my goodness, we are in for it, aren't we? We're in for a rough ride. We truly are. Because it's going to happen no matter what. It's difficult, like I said, but it's well worth it. Because it's really going to help you get to a point where when disaster strikes, gratitude provides a perspective from which we can view life entirely differently. and not be overwhelmed by the temporary circumstances. Because all circumstances are temporary. Nothing but love goes on forever. Remember that trials and suffering can actually refine and deepen gratefulness as we allow them to show us not to take things for granted. Our national holiday of gratitude, Thanksgiving, which will be here soon, was born and grew out of hard times. Do you realize almost half of the pilgrims died that first year? And yet, they took time to give thanks. It became a national holiday in 1863. And in 1863, we were in the midst of one of the bloodiest wars we ever fought in the Civil War. And it was moved to its current date in the 1930s when we suffered the worst depression we had ever had. And so you can see that out of these times of great suffering in many, many ways, gratitude and thanksgiving were used to help us through those times. Well, I think the reason for that is that when times are good, people take it for granted. Take this, everything for granted, and they don't really appreciate sometimes the good that we have in our lives. And the times of people who are really uncertain, when they're in total uncertainty, and through this people realize that how sometimes totally powerless they feel to change anything. We find we can change our minds. We can change how we see. So crisis can make us more grateful. And research says that the power of gratitude also helps us cope. It helps us cope with a crisis. Consciously cultivating an attitude of gratitude builds up the spiritual and psychological immune system. I don't know how they measure that, but they have. And there is scientific evidence that grateful people are more resilient and less stressed in life. Whether minor, everyday situations that happen or major upheavals in their life, the contrast between suffering and redemption serves as a basis for some tips to expressing gratitude. So one of the things that we don't often say here in Unity is remember the bad. We don't say that very often, do we? No, we don't say remember the bad or remember that bad thing that happened. No, we don't do that. It works this way. Think of the worst times in your life. And we did this during our meditation time. Think of those bad times in your life. We'll name them bad. Your sorrows, your losses, your sadnesses. And then remember that here you are. You're still here. You got through it. You survived that bad relationship. You're making your way out of the dark. You lost all your earthly possessions, but here you are. You're alive. You're breathing. You got through those things. My grandson, Aaron, and his brothers live in Washington, Illinois, and they, their dad lives in Peoria, and they go back and forth between the houses. Some of you know how that is. And their mother lives in Washington, Illinois, and you realize that they had that enormous, terrible storm. And my son called me and he said, have you watched the TV? And I said, no, I actually haven't. I haven't seen any news or anything happen. He said, well, there was a terrible tornado that went through Washington. And he said, I drove over because I couldn't get them on the phone, so I didn't know, how everything was. So he said, I got in the car and I drove over and I had to park several blocks from their house and get out and walk to see that if they were all right. And the whole row of houses across the street were just gone. They were totally demolished. And he said their front window was blown out, but everyone was fine. Everyone was okay. And I thought, wow, that's hitting awfully close to home. And when that happens to us, we think, woo, we really dodged that one, didn't we? But think of how those people who did not, whose homes were totally destroyed, and how they were left with absolutely nothing. His two brothers were fine, and everyone there were. The devastation was so bad. But Aaron plays football, and I was listening to NPR the other day and on the radio, and they were talking about this storm and how this football team in Washington is playing Springfield, Illinois, and that what the parents and the players in Springfield were doing was they procured 3 buses to go to Washington, pick up the people who had lost their cars, and bring them back to Springfield so that they would have a cheering section, so that Washington would have a cheering section. And in doing so, they loaded those buses up with food and essential clothing and things that we need for everyday living, and sent those up and brought the people back. And I thought, this is a way for us to come into a sense of gratitude, that there are people who are willing to be there for us when we need it. Now, did that mean that either team didn't play the hardest they could to win? And I don't know who won. So, but I thought, that's something that we do, and we do it so well as Americans. We reach out to those who have been hit hardest. And we reach out to them and we give what we can. And that gives those people an opportunity to find some gratitude in what has happened to them. To see that, yes, they've lost everything, but people care. They really do care about them. It's certainly easier to find times when things are good and we're happy and we can be filled with gratitude, but gratitude is something that we need to think about all the time. We need to be there all of the time. This process of remembering how difficult life used to be and how far we've come sets up an explicit way of dealing with what happens to us in life. It's a contrast, and it's fertile ground for gratefulness. Our minds think in terms of counterfactuals, mental comparisons, and that we make between the ways things are and the way things might have been or could be. And when we do too much of that, we find that we will not be very happy. But when we begin to look at it from a different viewpoint, from a different perspective, contrasting those negative times with now when everything is good, we begin to see things differently. It makes us feel happy or happier. And it enhances our overall well-being. And this opens the door to coping gratefully. Remember, all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. If you're interested in living life with more gratitude, I have some suggestions for you. Take a time each day. Many people like to do it in the morning, some people like to do it at night, and some people like to do it morning and night. And just take some time to perhaps get yourself a gratitude journal. This is one we have in the bookstore right now. It's a journal that you write down all the things that you're grateful for, all of those wonderful things that you have. And you know what? It starts to make you notice more when you do it on a formal basis. it helps you start to look at, hey, wait a minute, maybe things aren't as bad in my life as I thought. And go back and read the ones from the day before and the day before that. And do it as often as, and throughout the day. It's going to pop into your mind. Wow, I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that the traffic wasn't too bad today. I'm really grateful that it snowed early so that the streets were clear. Say thank you. Say thank you when someone does something nice for you. And really mean it. And when you're doing your gratitude journal, you might be reminded of something that someone did for you that you kind of just let go. And when you do that, you write that down. And you make a phone call. And if it's too early, make a note of it. Call them later. And say, when you did so-and-so, I really felt good. And I want to thank you so much for it. And if you don't call them, send them an email or a note. Or better still, tell them in person the next time you see them. Appreciate the negative things in your life. Take some time. There's always two ways to look at something. Always. Giving thanks for these things is a great way to remind yourself that there is good in just about everything. Just about everything. Problems can be seen as opportunities to grow and to be creative. We can get really creative when we do different things, when we see things differently. And learn a gratitude prayer. There are many prayers, religious or not, that can really help you. And if you have one memorized, you can say it at any time. So often use some little prayer that you say. Mine is the most simple one that I could think of, and it works so well for me. I use it as a mantra, and it's simply, thank you, God. Thank you, God. And I say it over and over and over again until I feel the benefit that comes from it. The other thing is that we want to do is to know that as we follow these ideas, that we grow spiritually and we expand our consciousness. It's what we do. So I invite you all right now, be grateful. Don't put it off. Don't wait until you get the new car, the new house, the new love of your life, until you have become a guru or a spiritual person. You are a spiritual person already, so, you're already there. And always remember this. This is the day that the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I know that as you practice these principles, you will be truly blessed. God bless you, and thank you.